Food Network spent 3 decades cultivating some of the most familiar faces on television. These were not merely cooking show presenters, they were names that people genuinely knew, personalities welcomed into homes each week, whose voices wove themselves into everyday life. Then, gradually, they were gone. Some departed quietly once their contracts ran out. Others were shown the door when the network shifted its focus. And some left under circumstances that were far from quiet. The roster of chefs who helped transform Food Network into what it became, only to vanish from it later, is longer than most people appreciate. And the stories behind each exit are far more compelling than any official statement ever let on. Sarah Moulton was among Food Network's earliest stars, and the story of her departure reveals nearly everything about how the network transformed over the years. When Food Network launched in 1993, it was built on a clear vision, serious, instructional cooking content presented by people with genuine culinary credentials. Moulton was a perfect embodiment of that vision. She had trained under Julia Child, one of the most revered figures in American culinary history, and brought that same composed, authoritative approach to her own programs, Cooking Live and Sarah's Secrets. She was not putting on a show. She was educating. For years, that formula worked. Then, the network began studying its ratings and observing what else was gaining traction elsewhere. Loud personalities, drama-driven competitions, programming that resembled reality television more than a cooking lesson. Food Network began steering its resources in that direction, and Moulton's thoughtful, technique-centered style grew less relevant to what the network wanted to become. She departed in 2007, though in many ways the network had already moved past the format she represented before she officially left. What followed is the part that rarely gets mentioned. Moulton did not fade away. She moved to PBS, where she hosted Sarah's weeknight meals for many years, connecting with an audience that genuinely valued what she had always offered. She also became a regular contributor to Christopher Kimball's Milk Street Radio, fielding cooking questions from listeners, and continued writing cookbooks, including Sarah Moulton's Home Cooking 101 in 2016. It turned out she did not need Food Network. If anything, Food Network needed her more than she needed it. Paula Deen was among Food Network's biggest names through the early 2000s. Her Southern cooking style, her warm screen presence, and her wholehearted embrace of rich, indulgent food earned her a genuinely devoted following. She hosted multiple programs, ran a restaurant empire, and had a cookware line along with the kind of widespread name recognition that most television personalities chase their entire careers. It all fell apart in 2013, and it happened with startling speed. A former employee of a restaurant Dean co-owned filed a lawsuit alleging a deeply troubling work environment, including misconduct and the use of racial slurs by Dean herself. During a legal deposition tied to the case, Dean acknowledged having used racial slurs in the past. Food Network announced it would not be renewing her contract, and sponsors began cutting ties within days. The speed at which her public brand collapsed was remarkable even by the standards of celebrity controversies. She settled the lawsuit out of court and issued public apologies, but Food Network had made its decision. What is notable about the aftermath, however, is how much she continued to build regardless. Her restaurants kept operating. She produced a syndicated program called Positively Paula for 2 years, appeared on Dancing with the Stars, and launched a podcast, a YouTube channel, a pet food line, and continued writing cookbooks at a prolific rate. By the time her cookbook total reached 18, combined sales had surpassed 11 million copies. The Food Network chapter ended in the most damaging way imaginable. Everything she had built around it kept moving forward. Whether that speaks to personal resilience or simply to the durability of a brand too large to fully dismantle is a question worth considering. Bobby Flay is one of the most accomplished chefs in Food Network's history. He ran multiple successful restaurants, earned James Beard Awards, and hosted more Food Network programs than nearly anyone else who ever appeared on the channel. Iron Chef America, Beat Bobby Flay. Boy Meets Grill, Throwdown with Bobby Flay. His name was embedded in the network's identity for nearly 3 decades. Then in 2021, he and Food Network parted ways after contract negotiations collapsed. Reports indicated Flay had been seeking a considerably larger deal, and the two sides could not find common ground. What makes this departure particularly telling is what it revealed about Food Network's economics at that moment. Flay was arguably the network's most bankable talent, with Beat Bobby Flay still pulling strong viewership. He had real leverage. The fact that Food Network allowed him to leave rather than meet his terms suggests either that the financial gap between them was simply too wide, or that the network had made a deliberate calculation about what top-tier talent was worth to them going forward. Flay eventually landed at Food Network's parent company in a different role before launching independent ventures. He has stayed publicly visible through his restaurants, his social media presence, and various culinary and media projects that do not depend on a network platform to sustain his profile. The lesson from his exit may be that Food Network had a ceiling on what it was willing to pay, even for the people most central to its brand, and that ceiling ultimately drove away some of its biggest names. Emeril Lagasse was the chef who elevated Food Network from a niche cable outlet into a genuine cultural phenomenon. Before Emeril Live debuted in 1997, the network was still searching for its audience. After it launched, Food Network had something it had never quite possessed before, a real star capable of generating the kind of energy and crowd response normally associated with entertainment rather than cooking. His catchphrases entered American pop culture. His restaurants expanded, his cookware line, his cookbooks, and his overall brand grew into a substantial empire fueled by the momentum the Food Network platform provided. By the late 2000s, however, the relationship had cooled. The network reduced his programming schedule, and Emeril Live concluded in 2010 after more than 800 episodes. The circumstances were publicly described as a mutual decision, the standard language deployed when neither party wishes to explain what actually took place. Lagasse did not slow down after leaving. He continued running his restaurant group, which at various points encompassed more than a dozen locations across multiple cities, returned to television through O'Hare platforms, and stayed active in the culinary world through appearances, events, and ongoing cookbook work. What his departure illustrated was a pattern that would repeat throughout Food Network's history with its biggest names. The network was extraordinarily effective at creating stars and considerably less effective at retaining them once those stars had grown large enough to have options elsewhere. Emeril built Food Network, and then Food Network became less essential to Emeril. Paul Hollywood is among the most recognizable baking personalities in the world, largely through his role on The Great British Bake Off, broadcast in the United States as The Great British Baking Show. Food Network introduced him to American viewers through a program called Paul Hollywood's City Bakes, which ran briefly but failed to attract the sustained viewership needed to justify a longer commitment. The show followed Hollywood as he traveled between cities and explored regional baking traditions. It was well-crafted and genuinely informative, but it did not resonate with American audiences the way his work on Bake Off had. The travel-based format was different enough from his judging role that it may have left viewers without the experience they associated with him. Food Network did not continue the program, and Hollywood returned his attention to Bake Off, where he remains a central figure on one of the most watched baking programs in television history. His story is distinct from most others on this list. He did not depart under difficult circumstances or following a creative disagreement. He simply did not translate to the American format in the way the network had anticipated. The audience that admired him on Bake Off was not necessarily the same audience that watched Food Network, and the show did not manage to bridge that divide. He returned to doing what he does best in the setting where it works best. That is not a failure. It is simply an honest result. Ellie Krieger built her Food Network career around a specific and genuinely valuable premise, that food could be healthy without sacrificing flavor, and that making smarter choices in the kitchen did not mean abandoning the enjoyment of eating. Her show Healthy Appetite with Ellie Krieger ran for multiple seasons and cultivated a devoted audience among viewers who wanted exactly that combination of nutritional awareness and real satisfying cooking. The difficulty was that the network's overall direction was pulling away from that message rather than toward it. As Food Network leaned further into indulgent, big personality content and competition-driven formats, a program centered on healthier choices became progressively less aligned with the identity the network was constructing. Krieger's show ended in 2009. She has continued working and publishing ever since, maintaining a strong presence in print media and cookbook publishing, contributing to various food outlets, and sustaining a profile in the nutrition and healthy cooking world that her Food Network years helped establish. Her audience found her through the network and followed her after she left. Her story reflects a broader pattern in Food Network's history. The hosts whose work was most grounded in education, health, or technique were often the ones gradually pushed aside as the network's priorities tilted toward entertainment over instruction. The network that originally embraced Julia Child's educational model eventually built its identity on something quite different, and the hosts who carried that original spirit were left to find other venues to continue their work. Ming Tsai began hosting East Meets West on Food Network in 1998, bringing a genuine fusion cooking perspective rooted in his background. Classically trained in French technique with deep ties to Chinese culinary tradition, he won a Daytime Emmy for the program, a testament to its quality, and also earned a James Beard Award, one of the most respected distinctions in American food culture. Food Network ran East Meets West for several seasons before it concluded in 2003. Tsai has said in interviews that the network's evolving direction was not well suited to the kind of sophisticated, technique-intensive content he was producing. As Food Network moved toward more accessible and entertainment-driven programming, the room for the serious culinary exploration Tsai represented grew increasingly limited. After leaving, he hosted Simply Ming on PBS for an extended run, demonstrating the loyal audience's approach could sustain on the right platform. PBS, with its educational mission and a viewer base actively seeking substantive content, was in many ways a far better structural fit for what Tsai was doing than a cable network increasingly organized around competition and spectacle. He also continued running his restaurant Blue Ginger in Massachusetts and remained a visible figure in the culinary world through events, charitable work, and media appearances. His post-Food Network career proved that a dedicated audience for serious, technique-focused cooking content genuinely existed. It simply was not the audience Food Network had chosen to pursue. Sandra Lee built a substantial Food Network career around a concept she called semi-homemade cooking, combining store-bought ingredients with fresh elements to produce meals that appeared impressive without demanding professional skill. Her show, Semi-Homemade Cooking with Sandra Lee, ran for years and reached a vast audience of home cooks who found her approach both practical and genuinely helpful.